Okay, so we are now streaming, so welcome everybody, and thank you guys for putting up with me playing a little music for you guys. Again, just trying to not immediately throw a bunch of stuff at you guys, trying to hopefully get you guys starting on the right foot. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and pause my streaming because now it's playing in the background. There we go, that's better. Okay. So today we are going to be doing something that we were supposed to do last week, but obviously I've had to push everything back a little bit. So we are going to be revising your rough draft end of clay brief rights. So you will be getting somebody else's brief right to turn it in. Obviously, if you have not finished it, you will need to make sure that you guys are submitting that. Um, but I kind of wanted to go over like what the guidelines are for writing, and I saw a lot of people listen to the podcast that I did last week about sorry, not Anne of Clay, about revising. So thank you guys for listening to that. So it was about 7 minutes, and it kind of covered this sort of stuff that I'm going to be talking about today, but just more in detail. I saw about 45 people have listened to it, so that's good. If you haven't yet, please do, because obviously you're going to be getting some extra information that you might not be getting today. So you always want to make sure that you're listening to the podcast for that. I'm going to be dropping another podcast tomorrow, actually. So just to make sure that you guys are keeping an ear out for that, it's going to be about it'll be about Franz Kafka, who's the author of the next story that we're going to be reading, which we're going to be reading a graphic novel next, which is always fun to read graphic novels. But for revision, the three things that I want you guys to take away from revision, it's not about just punctuation, and that's editing. So there's two different types of ways to improve your writing. One is editing, which is punctuation, spelling, grammar, all that sort of stuff, which is important. It's good to be clear and make sure that you have all that stuff kind of buttoned up. But revision is the most important for improving writing. So revision isn't just changing like the little superficial things like punctuation. It's changing the overall message of your writing. So the three things that you have to think about when you're revising someone else's paper is what do they need to add, what do they need to remove, and what do they need to change. So for addition, what's missing from the writing? So maybe like, for example, for the end of clay brief write, I asked you guys to write about how being able to see through the girlfriend's point of view, how did that help us see Rolf Carlet change throughout? Now, a lot of you wrote about how Rolf Carlet changed, which is good, but you guys are missing the other part of the prompt. So if you didn't talk about how seeing him change through the girlfriend's point of view from first person, then you're missing part of it. You probably need to add that. Um, I will say that a lot of people, for their explanation, you do need to add a little bit more detail. The most common thing that I wrote down for people in their writing was, how does this quote show it? So you're telling me what the quote shows, but you're not telling me how the quote shows it. So that's the most important thing, is not just saying this quote shows that Rolf Carlet was really afraid when he pretended he wasn't. Cool. How does it show that? How do I know that? What part of the quote tells me that? So that's what you guys need to do, is like pick apart the quote and like look at like specific words that the author uses to say like, oh, when they say this word, it really shows that he was, he was afraid of like showing his emotions because he didn't want to like, seem like he was weak or something like that. What can I do to fill in the blanks for my readers? So maybe you like said one thing and then you skipped ahead and got to the next point. So you need to make sure that you're like filling in those blanks. So don't skip ahead. Make sure that like there's a logical way you're telling your readers your information, and don't skip around. So that's like where transitions really are important. So if you're talking about like, even though he was this way before, as the story progresses, we learn of how he was, really more fragile or vulnerable than what he kind of led on. So that's where adding transitions is important. Removing, I will say that this one was a lot better. There will be probably less removing that needs to happen. Last in the brief write for Harrison Bergeron, a lot of people had way too much summary, and I saw a significant decrease in that this time, so that's good. But if there's any unnecessary information that doesn't have to do with the topic, you want to make sure that they remove that. So removing stuff is just as important as adding stuff. It's not always about making your writing longer. I've had plenty of papers that have been like twice as long as everyone else's, but not nearly as good because it was just rambling and there's a bunch of information that I didn't need. So you want to make sure that you add, that you're removing, and then finally that you are changing. So maybe you were a little bit off. So, like, for example, somebody was talking about how, first of all, Rolf Carlade was like a woman, which he's not. He's the girlfriend's, the boyfriend, the reporter. So that would be something that would need to be changed. But maybe like you said that he was always afraid even when he was younger and he always acted afraid. Well, if you read it, he didn't act afraid when he was like a reporter. He would always act more brave, like more brave than kind of necessary, just to kind of prove that he was that like basically he was macho, he was tough, he wasn't like, you know, he wasn't like a weak person. But obviously we learned later that he really was in a lot of ways. So those are three things that you guys need to be looking for. So you guys should receive one person's essay. So for your, it says rough draft, so that's something that I need to change. It should have said final draft. So 50 points of your final draft, is 10 of them are going to be from revising somebody else's essay today or their brief write. So once you're done revising, you will look at the comments that other students left for you, also the comments that I left for you. So if you look at the rough draft that you turned in, I left you guys all comments last night. If you did not receive any comments for any reason, reach out to a friend or family member for you to read it. It's ultimately your responsibility to make sure that your writing gets better. Obviously, it would help if your peers also helped you out too, but again, you making your final draft better is ultimately your responsibility. Make sure that you're making quality changes to your final draft. So don't just do like one or two words here or there. That's not real revising. Like I said, add, what are you going to add to make it better? What do you need to remove anything to make it better? And then do you need to change your explanations to make it better? For some of you, you might have to play around with like the structure of the brief write and look at the 7 floors brief write sample that I gave you guys, because it kind of tells you like the structure. I had a few people who did like both quotes, the before and after quotes, right next to each other with no explanation after each quote. So make sure that you guys are doing that. Once you give me a quote, you always need to explain why you told me that quote. It's not just like a laundry list of quotes that you're adding in. That's not what a brief write is. You have to tell me in your own words, why is it important? How is it answering the prompt? And all that good stuff. So what I'm going to have you guys do is, if you go to the rough draft assignment for End of Clay, you are going to click on where it says peer review. So I'm going to go ahead and change my screen real quick, so that way I can show you guys. Well, I'm just logging into Canvas real quick. And not into your book. Okay, I'm going to change my screen now. Okay. So we're going to go to world literature. I'm going to go to student view, so that way you guys can see what it'll look like on your end. So we're going to go to modules as always. We're going to go to this week. So we're in week 11, which just seems crazy to me that we're already in week 11. All right, so week 11. All right, End of Clay. I'm sorry, we're going to go to week 10 because we're going to the rough draft. So go to End of Clay, brief write, rough draft. So last week's module. And for you guys on the right-hand side, obviously my test student has not submitted anything, but over here where it says submission, you should say assigned peer reviews, and you're going to click on that. And that's where you're going to be able to provide comments and feedback for your peers for what they need to do. All right, so that's basically what we're going to be doing today. And once again, I'm going to put you guys in breakout rooms. So even though you're going to be working with somebody, it's been randomly generated, but you just need to leave feedback. Once you're done with a peer review, I'm going to put you all in individual breakout rooms. Call me to your breakout room so that way I can come make sure that you've left a comment for somebody. If you're not done with obviously your end of play rough draft, you need to be working on that. So everybody has something that they should be doing. Um, Obviously, class gets out at 9:15. If you guys finish early, uh, you guys won't finish by 9:15. But if you guys finish anytime after 9:15, I will come to your breakout room and I will excuse you. If you guys leave before I excuse you, you'll be marked absent, and then you'll lose the points for participation today. So make sure that you guys are following through on that. Everybody should be able to finish before class ends at 10:20. So, and that includes people who have not finished their rough drafts yet. It's again 10 sentences. You guys should be able to do it. You've had over a week to work on it. So, and if you have questions, call me to your room. If you're stuck on like writing a rough draft, have me come to your room so I can give you some pointers on what you need. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my live stream real quick.